Today I speak to Oliver Bolton, who is the CEO and co-founder of Earthly, a startup aimed at protecting and regenerating more than 1% of our planet by 2030. Earthly helps enterprise businesses find, screen, and invest in the world's highest integrity nature-based projects. These projects are monitored through a rigorous project quality assessment that screens 106 data points across carbon, biodiversity, and social impact. Recently, Earthly was the winner of the COP27 Climate Tech Prize and a winner of Uplink's 2023 and the Nature Tech Prize. Tune in to learn more about nature-based solutions and all the great work being done by Earthly.
Yeah, it's ready. Well, welcome, Oliver, to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
What is the idea behind Earthly?
Yeah, the idea behind Earthly was I don't know, really the awareness of the severity of the climate and the biodiversity crises and wanting to, contribute and help make a difference. And so, in about 2018, shortly after the birth of my son, we had all the media, the IPCC 1.5 degrees report, and all the media headlines were we've got 10 years to defeat climate change. And it was around that time that I kind of, from a personal perspective, kind of understood the severity of the situation. And because I just had my son, I kind of had this thought about a future conversation with him where he would kind of challenge me and say, your generation knew the severity of the problem, why didn't you do more? And it's weird, but that kind of thinking about that future conversation was a real catalyst for me to say, right, I'm going to move my career into this space and and build something that will make a meaningful difference and a dent in the problem.
So how does the Earthly model work?
Yeah, I mean, so when we, with my co-founder Lorenzo at the very beginning, we were, looking at where we could make an impact. And one of the major issues that we saw in the market was there's a funding gap to nature. It's about $700 billion a year short if we're to get the money to the projects and meet our kind of climate and biodiversity goals. I mean, looking at why there's this big funding gap, one of the big issues is around trust in the market. And so early on, we decided that we would focus on this and we would try and bring trust to the market. And so what we've built at Earthly is an assessment that screens nature-based projects around 106 quality indicators, evenly split across carbon, biodiversity, and social impact. So it's a really holistic kind of quality screening tool. And what this does is it enables the businesses that we work with to kind of de-risk their nature investments and find the best projects around the world that align with their values and meet these these quality standards that we've developed.
Earthly utilizes voluntary carbon and biodiversity credits. How do these voluntary credit? How does the voluntary credit market differ from the normal carbon and biodiversity credit market?
Yeah, so the biodiversity credits is a new product that we've launched a few weeks ago. And essentially, what we've taken is in the UK, we're quite lucky. We've got this compliance biodiversity net gain system, where in essence, if you're a property developer, you have to map out the biodiversity impact of your new property development, and you have to offset it 110%. That's either on the site through like green walls and roofs and the land around it, or that's through projects offsite. So what we have that was launched at the beginning of this year is this whole new market for biodiversity net gain units to be used for the compliance market for property developers. So what we've done is we've essentially taken the exact same system because it's government approved with DEFRA, and we've taken these big B&G units and we've split them into 9 square meters. But we've also followed the same like legal protection. So that 9 square meters is protected for 30 years with a focus on biodiversity improvement. And So yeah, in essence, from around £100 of credit, companies can make these voluntary contributions to UK projects with a focus on biodiversity net gain. And yeah, we just had our first sort of major sale to a company called King, who are who developed Candy Crush, the game. So they've been an amazing client. And what's great about the voluntary biodiversity credits is it's a way for UK companies to support UK initiatives because there's not a huge amount of carbon focused projects here.
There has been a lot of criticism about the idea of biodiversity credits in its current forms. Could you elaborate about some of these shortcomings and how biodiversity credits could be improved?
Yeah, I think the main issue is there's lots of people around the world trying to work on, the approach to take. And there's a few differing opinions. And so I think one of the big challenges that the sector's faced is around that lack of alignment on exactly what a biodiversity credit should look like. I think compared to carbon, voluntary carbon credits, carbon's a much easier thing to measure. It's one single thing, whereas biodiversity is a lot more complex. So some people are looking at like 1% uplift. Some people are looking at a land-based approach. So I think that's probably been one of the main criticisms is there's no unified, approach so far. And to that, we just felt, as well, there's a lot of sort of inaction and, one of the challenges people say is actually there's how many buyers are out there to purchase the credits. So for us, we are in a unique position here in the UK and we have this compliance government linked system. So we're like, look, it makes complete sense just to build off that. Because if it's a trust thing, what better than to have, a kind of government linked scheme that you can then adapt for voluntary needs. So I think that's been one of the major challenges. And how can it be improved? Well, I think over time we're going to have consensus around like what is the best approach, and there'll be a clear kind of leader of this is how we do things, and this is how it will evolve. So we're really interested to keep following the trends and the developments in the sector. We're on a few different biodiversity credit working groups, and we intend to evolve our voluntary biodiversity credits with best practice in the market.
How does Earthly assess projects for quality and longevity?
Yeah, so our assessment I touched on at the beginning is really thorough, really, really detailed. I think it's probably the most comprehensive assessment on the market, looking at these 106 quality indicators. In the carbon side of that, there's about 35 different quality indicators we look at. It's leakage, it's permanence, it's additionality. Are the credits linked to a project accurate? All the kind of the usual things you'd expect. We also bring in data from other partners. So like we work with B0, we work with Renosta, where they have their data on projects. We kind of cross-reference it with our data, if that makes sense. There's the 9 different data layers that we kind of ingest when we're screening projects. Looking at the biodiversity side is things like, has a baseline been carried out? What are the approaches and methodologies that they're using? And in the social side, it's really important things like free and prior informed consent. How engaged is the community, in decision making and in the projects, and all these things are kind of interlinked. But what we found is, if the community is not engaged correctly, then the chances of the project failing are much, much higher. So we typically find that projects fail our assessment for the 2 main reasons. One, they've overcredited, so they've said that they're doing more good than actually we believe they are. And then the other one is around community engagement and involvement. They haven't adequately involved the community and integrated the community into the project. So we see that as a big sort of threat to project failure. And then for projects that we're working with, we monitor them ongoing. We have a satellite partner. So we're looking at different sort of geospatial layers and tracking the development of projects over time on a periodic basis as well.
So what exactly is regenerative farming and how does it contribute to biodiversity recovery and the climate crisis? And also elaborate a
Yeah.
bit about your project in India.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool project. We're really proud to be supporting, the Indo-Gangetic Plains is a really amazing area. But look, to answer your first bit of your question, regenerative farming really focuses on techniques that restore soil health, do things like increase water retention and promote biodiversity. And the reason why it's so beneficial in the Indo-Gangetic Plain region is the region's known for its fertile soil, but it's facing severe challenges like soil degradation. So by implementing practices like crop rotations, where you're cycling, between different types of crops that are being grown, doing things like cover cropping, where you grow something to cut it and blend it into the soil to enrich the soil, reduce tillage, so you're just sort of disturbing the soil as least as possible. So a combination of all these things can increase the soil fertility, but support richer biodiversity and ultimately sequester carbon, and contribute to climate change mitigation as well as biodiversity improvement.
Early is also working on mangrove restoration in Madagascar and Pakistan. So what exactly goes into mangrove restoration?
Yeah, so it's the restoration efforts. They're coastal based, and it mainly involves taking the mangrove saplings, and they're called propagules. They're these kind of like seed pods, sort of long, thin things, and essentially inserting it into the mud. And then essentially that takes root, and then a new mangrove will grow from that. And they, they're really one of my favorite ecosystems of mangroves, just because there's so many like benefits, ecosystem services from them. There's obviously the key things like reducing carbon, and they can remove carbon a lot more efficiently than a lot of other ecosystems. They have a thick root system that reduces erosion. They're great through resilience, so like protecting coastlines from storms. The roots provide an amazing nursery for fish to grow. And so there's a whole range of these different ecosystem services. I actually did a calculation recently that I think for the cost of actually planting a mangrove, there's about a 400 times return in all of these the value of all of these ecosystem services when you put them together. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite ecosystems that we're supporting at Earthly.
Talk about the work Earthly is doing to restore peatlands. What exactly are peatlands and why are they important, and how do you protect them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in short, peatlands are they're waterlogged ecosystems that store vast amounts of carbon in this very rich soil, and it's really important that they stay wet to prevent the carbon from being released into the atmosphere. So the specific project in Indonesia, is protecting these peatlands from drainage and deforestation, which is an issue because people are often draining the peatlands and then turning them into agricultural land because the peat is very rich. It's very good for growing crops. But of course, at that, when it's drained, it then starts to release large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. So, by re-wetting the drained peatlands, the project we're supporting is helping with fire prevention and promoting a more sustainable land use. So it's a critical ecosystem to be protected. Has some great biodiversity there, including bird species, and actually the specific project that we're working with also has amazing orangutan as well that they're protecting and supporting. So seen those images of the amazing creature in various documentaries. So yeah, it's also one of my favorites that we're working with.
What are some other ecosystems which Earthly works in?
Yeah, I mean, we really try and cover everything. We want to have a great blend of representation of the different nature-based solutions and ecosystems that can contribute. So I'd say others are grasslands, tropical forests. They're equally important to the ones that we've discussed. They have critical habitats to support diverse flora and fauna, and as well providing carbon storage. So we are working with projects all around the world. In the grasslands case, it's controlled burns, managing invasive species, encouraging the growth of native plants. And a lot of the tropical forests, it's just about protection. The forests are under threat of logging for firewood to enable communities there to have more cattle, to graze cattle. And so, the projects we're working with are essentially, providing an alternative revenue stream to communities that incentivizes them to protect the forest rather than kind of commoditize it or change it and enable them to make other revenue streams. And we also do quite a lot of nature-based innovation. So we have, in the past, we've supported kelp seaweed projects, seagrass, projects where there's not yet a credit associated with them, but they're doing really important work, and we want to try and help accelerate funding to this innovation as well.
So what have been some of your most prominent challenges which you have faced in your journey of setting up early and just carrying out your restoration projects and nature-based solutions?
I think the big issue that we've had is, there's been a lot of scandals in our industry. There's been a lot of negative media, and there's a huge range of project quality, and that's one of the reasons why we developed our assessment. Because we firsthand saw there were some great projects on one registry and also some not so good ones. And so, to give you an idea, we've screened 400 projects the last year, and only 8% have met our minimum standards. So that really kind of shows you the challenge that the industry has. And I'd love for that figure to be the other way around. I'd love for 92% to be passing and 8% failing. But I think around this whole issue of quality is that businesses are very scared to invest in nature. They don't want to be caught into a scandal. They don't want to be associated with a project which is in a Guardian article. And I guess the flip side is this has also validated our project quality assessment, which has been a tool to kind of help businesses de-risk. But that wider macro challenge of being scared to invest in nature, being scared of being called out, has led to green hushing. People not talking about the great work they're doing. And also just led to inaction, companies then saying, no, we're just going to focus on decarbonisation rather than nature protection and restoration, which we'll do in the future, when reality is we just don't have that luxury. We have to do both. We have to work on deep decarbonisation across all industries. And at the same time, in parallel, we have to be accelerating money to nature protection and restoration. And we just don't have the luxury not to do both at the same time.
What about your best memories from your work with nature restoration?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really rewarding industry to work in. I'm meeting some amazing people and projects, and so I think getting the project updates, seeing the images, seeing the satellite photos where we can actually see the restoration, hearing the stories from the people, the communities on the ground who are being supported by the companies that we're connecting them to is incredibly rewarding. Because of the impacts of traveling, we don't get to sort of see in person as many of our projects as we love. But one of the things that we've done that's maybe unique to Earthly as well is we've mapped out the impact data, the impact metrics. So if we have a healthcare company, we're able to tell them, right, this is the amount of people receiving healthcare support linked to your transaction with the project. These are the number of vaccinations that have been delivered. So I think getting all of those impact metrics, is really rewarding to kind of see the tangible positive impact that we've had in partnership with our corporate clients sort of over the years.
And my final question for the podcast is, how can individuals contribute to Earthly and nature restoration as a whole?
I think you can find more information at earthly.org. We've got a marketplace where anyone can go and find projects, see the scores and support them. So that's the first thing I'd recommend. I think spreading the word about the power of nature-based solutions and the fact that they can deal with a third of our climate crisis from carbon and 100% of our biodiversity crisis. I think more people that can spread the word about that, the better. And I think the other thing I'd say is, like, from an individual perspective, is like now is when we need, for those listeners who are sustainability managers at companies or in a position where they can instigate change, we need as many bold and brave kind of climate leaders as possible. Not only focusing on deep decarbonization, but getting money to the best projects for protection and restoration. And so, yeah, just more of that climate leadership from people around the world would be something I would love to see. Yeah, I think that probably covers it.
Thank you so much for taking time out for this. It was a pleasure speaking to you and learning about nature restoration in more detail.
Pleasure to chat with you. And yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast.